Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the podcast. This is Coco and Dalts. I'm not Coco.
And I'm not Dalts.
And on this edition of the podcast, we are going to talk about a Netflix show called The Stranger.
Which was just released last week if you're listening to this in real time.
So, Coco, did you want to handle the summary this week?
I did. Usually it's the other way around, but we decided our relationship has gotten kind of stale, so we need to
Wait, what?
do some role play and mix things up a little bit.
I missed that meeting.
The producer and I were talking about it before.
Oh, the producer.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry
Was this
about
at lunch? You and the producer?
A long lunch with wine and... Anyways, so do we want to start over?
No. Okay. You go ahead and do the summary, and then I'll go and punch the producer.
Okay. So The Stranger is an 8-part Netflix series. As we said, it's based on a novel by Harlan Coben, who I had never heard of before this, but apparently is a well-known author with many books published. The titular stranger is a lady in the greater Manchester, England area who digs up dirt on people and then goes around and tells people their deepest, darkest secrets. Some people she blackmails. 2 people in this 8-part series she did not blackmail, one of whom is a man who she told his wife had faked her pregnancy a couple years earlier, and the other is that man's father who she said, you were a terrible husband to your first wife and you cheated all the time. And oh, guess what? You've got a kid out there from one of your many mistresses. So the stranger is not actually the main character of the show. The main character is the guy whose wife faked her pregnancy. The show really focused on him because after he and his wife got into an argument about said faked pregnancy, she disappeared. So the whole show was kind of focused on his attempts to figure out what happened and where his wife had gone and his kids dealing with their mother's absence. So that was really kind of the main storyline of the show, but there were many, many other characters and storylines in the show. One of the ladies who was blackmailed by the stranger is the best friend of a cop. She wound up dead, so the cop was investigating her death. There were just lots of storylines, lots of subplots. The kids of the lady who faked her pregnancy had lots of airtime as well. So there were lots of different storylines and subplots, but it was an 8-part series. I think all of them tied together in a really good way, and everything kind of came together at the end, and everything was explained really well. And Dalts doesn't like it when I give away spoilers, so
Spoiler alert.
so I won't talk about the end too much. But what did you think of The Stranger, Dalts?
I liked it. It was very tense. It's kind of like Harlan Coben novels are very, I wouldn't say pulpy, but they're very rapid fire, very story driven and character action driven. And you're not in it for the writing, you're in it for the story and the plot and everything like that.
This isn't like The Irishman, which was the 3.5-hour character study of De Niro's character. This is strictly plot driven.
There's not a lot of deliberate action or scenes in this series because it's very much suspenseful. I thought the music was really well done and really well used in this because it helped build the tension. It's all about the music, as we saw in an earlier show that we watched when we watched the Aaron Hernandez docu-series, and the music did not fit that at all. The beginning credit music was like symphony orchestra music, and it was like
it was like a Disney princess
it was
music opening,
like the Nutcracker or something like that. And
it was really crazy.
It didn't really fit the series. So music for me is an important thing in life in general, but when you're looking at a series like this, music helps propel the story along and helps set the mood, and a lot of people I don't think get full value out of music. So the music was good in this. I thought that there were some spectacular moments and some sensational moments that tried to hook people in the first couple of episodes. So we're looking at the bonfire with the kids, and they're all gathered around this bonfire and they're all dancing, and then this naked kid goes running through the woods, and we're wondering what is going on here with this. It's getting some sort of ecstasy or something like that, but then the kid almost dies. And what's the connection with the blackmail lady? And there's some scenes there that it seemed like they were supposed to be all tied together, and they actually were separate threads. And so at the end of the series, you're like, well, what about this? How did that relate? Oh no, it was just a coincidence. It just happened to be that they were whacked on the juice, and that's why they were doing these things. So there are a couple of things that didn't fit for me, but overall, it was a really well orchestrated ride, and the tension was palpable from one episode to the next. So it kept me wanting to watch the next one, which is the whole point of these kinds of things.
Right, exactly. It was, like I said, an 8-episode series. That each episode was around 45 minutes. We could have probably knocked it out in 2 days, but because of time constraints, we ended up needing 3 days.
Regular life stuff.
Right, regular life
Jobs,
stuff. Yeah.
family.
Oh, jobs.
Oh, jobs.
Getting in the way of me living my best life. Yeah, like Dalts said, it was very suspenseful. There was a lot going on, but I could see how if this had been on American network television, they could have filled a 22-episode regular season with these, although there would have been more drag. There probably would have been a couple filler episodes. Stuff would have gotten explained multiple times. But with 8 episodes, the action was...
It was jam-packed.
It was jam-packed, but everything got explained. Like, I didn't feel... The only thing that really kind of didn't get explained, I felt like, was the very end of the final episode when... I won't discuss spoilers, but something really, really big happened that finally kind of resolved the central mystery of the wife going missing. And it didn't really get explained how that was covered up, basically. Yeah. And I feel like they could have added an extra 3 minutes to show what... I mean, in my head, I'm pretty sure I know what happened, but it just would have been nice because... everything was explained in the whole rest of the show. So it would have been nice just to have an extra 2 or 3 minutes of action of them saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. Like, you go here, I go here. Like, we feign ignorance, So
there were a couple of holes. There were a couple of plot holes that you're like, well, why did that happen? And how that wouldn't really happen. I mean, but they were very minor, and they didn't detract away from me being caught up in the whirlwind of suspense. But yeah, I agree with it. That part at the end there was a little bit of a hole there for me. It's like, well, why, how could he, and then why does she? And then,
that seemed like it was the shortest episode of all, too. That was only about like 40 minutes. So I'm like, we say this all the time. This is Netflix. This isn't American network television. You aren't in the time constraint of, you have like 48 minutes and 15 seconds to get this in.
To get the commercials in and everything.
You can have as much time as you would like. I will say nothing felt extraneous, like I've mentioned, but I have not read the book, so I don't know how closely it tracked to the book, if there were maybe subplots in the book that didn't make it into the show simply because they said, well, these don't further the story, or maybe they're not as compelling as the other subplots, or maybe Netflix did give them like a hard 8-episode like limit, and they said, okay, we just can't fit everything in. Because I know in LA Confidential, the guy who wrote that book, apparently that's just chock full of like all these different storylines. And so when Curtis Hanson sat down to adapt the screenplay, he just had to pick out like one storyline, and focus on that, because there was just no way they could have adapted the entire book.
Well, books is complicated.
That's true.
So, but I think that this book is probably not all that complicated, knowing the genre. And we should say that originally the story was set in New Jersey.
Right.
New Jersey, the United States, not Jersey in
England.
Over there.
I don't really know why.
So I wanted to talk about that. Yeah. I think that, that's sort of disjointed to me, because there's not really... Maybe they adapted the story so that it was a soccer team instead of a baseball team or something like that. And there's what they did there was very well done. So the adaptation was very well done, because it didn't feel like it was an American story taking place in England. Right. It felt like an English story.
It's not like everybody was running around with guns and you were like, this is England, not America.
Well, and that's where
the one person who had a gun was a cop who would have a gun.
Right. And there was a lot of shock around the one death in the movie as a result of a gun. Right. So I think that would be genuine in England. And in New Jersey, not so much, maybe. I don't know. Probably, a gun death every now and then, but in England, it was a shocking thing. And that character's death was definitely dwelled upon, I thought, respectfully. And I don't think it would have been so much if it had been in an American setting, because just not necessarily saying anything about American culture, but just the way that American movies treat death.
Right. It's an afterthought.
It's just like, that somebody was killed.
Yeah.
Whereas in this movie, there was a lot of mourning going on, and it extended beyond the episode where the character was killed. So I really liked that. I liked that adaptation, and it felt authentically English to me, or non-American Western. The other part that I really liked about this, and we talked about this off air, was the mixed racial aspect. Right. Is that pretty much every couple was a mixed race couple. And it didn't seem forced to me. It didn't seem like a quota thing, like sometimes it does in movies or TV shows, where I was like, okay, character X, well, let's make that person not white. So it just felt like it was a natural part of the story, and it was a natural part of that community. And so that really worked out well for me, I thought.
Right, especially when you have a large metropolitan area like Manchester, and you're also in England, which has a history of empire, with lots of different cultures coming here from the far out places of the empire. So there would naturally be more interracial coupling in those instances. Like it was, I think the lady who faked her pregnancy and her husband, like that family was white. And then
they were the central characters in the story.
They were the central characters. And then I think the only other, like maybe the lady who got killed with the gun, her family was white. Yeah. And then but her husband, you barely saw him. Like her daughter popped up in a few episodes, but wasn't really a main character. So everybody else was, it was really nice to see diversity on screen.
Absolutely, and not treated in a, like I said,
fetishistic sort of way,
right, or a quota kind of way. Like it was a natural part of the story, and nobody dwelled on it. There was nobody ever said, well, your dad's from here and your mom's from there. Like it wasn't. It was just. They were just characters in the story, which is the way it should be. We shouldn't step back and be all observy about it and all like, let's give ourselves credit for doing this. It's the way real life is, right?
And I don't know, maybe that was the reason why they did move it to England instead of being in the States, was maybe they said maybe it's one of those things where they have like diversity. I hate to say quotas, but they're like those what are they called? Those things where you say like, oh, a certain percentage of like the crew, et cetera, has to be like a diverse field, and we're going to get more of that if we go somewhere else than if we stay and try to film in Jersey, right? Where everybody might be white or whatever.
Right.
So,
yeah.
I don't know. It was I liked that. It was.
So, what did you think overall, Coco, of the series?
I enjoyed it. I did like the performances. I thought all the actors did a really good job. Like Stephen Ray popped up, right? Like in a few episodes. I think the British have a good knack at playing like world weary and defeated pretty well, and like basically
why is that, do you think?
All of the older people in the show kind of had that down a little bit. I did like the husband of the lady who faked her pregnancy in the beginning. He was sort of the slick lawyer with his hair slicked back, and he was wearing the suits, and he looked suave. And like by the end, his hair is all in his face, and he's wearing just like jeans.
He's got 5 o'clock shadow.
He looks like he's back in the 90s with like the flannel, and he's got blood all over him. So I like the progression of that, like showing how his character,
the regression of the character.
So
I also like the fact that there's a lot of the characters were. And perhaps this is another reason they didn't film it in the States, but they were not your traditional lead-looking people.
Right.
So, Siobhan Finneran, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Siobhan.
Thank you. She was the lead detective on the case, and she was not what you wouldn't cast her in the States in that role, I don't think. She was like an older person. She was a little rough around the edges. She looked like a cop to me.
Yeah,
she looked like a cop who had been on the force for a while. But that doesn't necessarily, for a woman, that doesn't necessarily translate into the same role in the States. I think an American man they would have cast a rugged-looking man in that role, an older guy, easily. But I think that, so it took some bravery on their part to cast somebody who was not your traditional, polished woman cop, and she was great. I thought she was really good. And like we said, Richard Armitage, who was the husband of the pregnancy faker, he was really good. He sort of verged on over dramatic at some certain points, I should say. Like he was a little bit melancholy, but he walked the line a lot, and his character goes through such a range of emotions that it would have been hard to not be extreme. But I thought he did a really good job, and he's in a lot of the scenes. So you have to identify with that lead character in order to enjoy the show. The other guy who was really good was Sean Dooley, who plays Doug Tripp, who's the neighbor from across the street, who is a bit of a doofus, but he plays a really key role in the movie. And I bought him as being a goofball. Like he was really good.
Everybody has that neighbor who's like a swinger, like, hey.
Yeah. Hey, what are you doing? Right. I remember that one time I was living at a place and our neighbor came over and said, we were unloading a chair from the car that we had bought at the store, and he comes into the garage. He's like, "Hey, what'd you buy? How much did that cost? Where'd you get it?" It's like walking right into the house with us as we're carrying this piece of furniture. It's like, buzz off, buddy. So everybody has that neighbor where you're like, get out of my face, and he does a really good job in this role. And the kids were really good, like Jacob Dudman, who's Thomas Price, who's one of the sons of the pregnancy faker. He did a really good job, but also Brandon Fellows, who was the larger kid.
Who was Tripp's son.
Right, and who actually, not perhaps accidentally, trips out on some...
illegal substances
as a key plot point of the story. Yeah. He was really good in that, too. I thought he was a very endearing character, and he had that like sidekick affability to him. He,
in the first couple episodes, I didn't love his character.
Oh yeah.
But then as the show went on and he got like a bigger role, like I started to like him.
Yeah.
I will say one thing I did read was one of the things they had to change about the book when they set it in England as opposed to the States was the neighbor in the book, his first name was Tripp. His name was like Tripp Smith. And they were like, no Englishman would ever be named Tripp. So that's why they gave him Tripp as the last name. But then he was referred to as like his neighbor would be like, hey, Tripp, what's up? Just like referring to.
It's like having a name like Brock or something like that.
Right, yeah. So, yeah, I thought the performances were all really good. I enjoyed it. I thought 8 episodes was...
That was just right.
Yeah, it was the perfect length. Like I said, I could see them being able to fill 22 if it went to standard network television. But I think 8 was... the perfect number. There was never any point where I thought it dragged.
Yeah.
Or
you wanted to get it to the next scene or something like that.
Right, exactly. Like there was never a point where I picked up my phone to like start looking at Facebook. And every episode did end on a cliffhanger. So there was one night where we watched 4 episodes and we were only going to watch 3, but then the third one ended and we were like, oh crap, now we got to watch the next one.
We're hooked. And that's the thing with Netflix is like you've got to sometimes I've cheated when I've been binge watching things is that I will get to the halfway point of an episode where it's not suspenseful and I'll stop watching because I know that if I watch to the end of the episode, I'll want to watch again. So I get into the sort of like the middle and I treat that as my breaking point because if I don't, I'll be binging all night long and I'll be up till 2:30 and then have to get up at 5 or something like that.
And like we said, jobs getting in the way of us living our best lives. So.
Well, the other part about that too is that I think that in the same vein as that the show doesn't need to be any certain length. They don't need to have certain amount of episodes either. Like it doesn't have to be 8 episodes. I think we saw that with the second season of Stranger Things, where it was one episode too long, I thought.
Or with the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, which was 8 episodes, and it could have been 4.
It could have been 4.
It could have been 4, maybe 5.
Right.
You know.
So there shouldn't be a hard stop on the number of episodes. I mean, there should be. Let's give it what it's worth, but let's not stretch it either.
And obviously, we are not involved in Netflix production areas, but we should be. So Netflix, if you would like to contact us and give us some kind of deal or let us, an
advisory deal.
Yeah, like we would totally be into that. You can reach us at cocoanddalts@gmail.com. Again,
yes, you can.
cocoanddalts@gmail.com.
And you can also hit up our Facebook page, which is hugely popular these days.
At Coco and Dalts. And is spelled out, not the ampersand.
Right, because that probably breaks something. So overall, thumbs up, A+. What do you say, Coco?
Yeah, I'd definitely give it thumbs up. I'd give it A-, B+. It was, very suspenseful. It held my attention. I thought the performances were great. there was never any point where I was like, oh God, make this stop. Like, which I realize is a low bar to clear, but no, it was really good. It was really well done.
Well, and I think the tipping point for whether you like a series or not is whether you're going to watch the next episode, right? Like
Right.
it's a very much an episode by episode kind of thing. It's like, well, I'm good here. I'm done. Like a couple of the things that I've watched on Netflix, I've watched, and they haven't been serial, obviously, but I've watched an episode here, an episode there, and then I'm out. Like I don't need to watch the entire series. So this one it definitely had that for me. It definitely had that addictability and the bingeability, and the fact that it was each episode was less than an hour long.
Right.
Especially after having sat through 3.5 hours of The Irishman, like we got that's half of this entire series.
Right, totally.
And it's a completely different experience, obviously, but way more thrills.
Yeah, no kidding. So you give it 2 thumbs up?
I give it 2 thumbs up. I give it a bingeability factor of 97. I know, I just made that up, but definitely worth sitting down for 8 hours. I guess it is.
Wow, Coco and Dalts in semi-rare agreement on
Right.
some kind of like pulpy,
Who would have thought?
non-literary type entertainment.
So if you come to us and you say, we've got this story that is written by an American author, it takes place in New Jersey, but we're going to set it in England.
I will say the only thing I think might have been still American is that everybody was in their cars all the freaking time. Like there was one scene where they were on a train, right? But that's because they were looking for the missing pregnancy faker.
Yeah.
And not because they were using it to travel somewhere.
Right.
They just...
And there was that train yard scene where where the lead guy is looking for the stranger.
Yeah.
There's
But
the train there, but they're not on the train. or
right,
anything
they're
like that.
just running around. So I will say maybe that was a thing that is left over from American culture is the use of cars by freaking everybody. But
Well, and also the food looked really delicious in the show.
I don't
Yeah.
remember any food.
So some good ethnic food there, some legitimate cultural food.
Like bangers and mash.
Bangers and mash. I was thinking more of Indian food, but yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Spotted dick. I don't know.
Okay. So
That's a real dish.
I know it is.
Okay.
Yeah. And on that note, we're going to go out on the spotted dick. So for another week of the podcast, I'm not Coco.
And I'm not Dalts.